Hey folks, welcome back. If you are a hangback flipper in your short game, I'm here to help. I said that phrase to a student the other day and it kind of made me laugh and got me thinking of a video that I want to do for you. And what I mean by a hangback flipper is you're someone that hits short game shots and you find yourself struggling with bad contact, a lot of skulls and a lot of chunks because you tend to have your body behind the golf ball. And then as a result, you tend to flip it and use your arms and hands a lot. So today I'm here to break down why we make this mistake, what's the most common thing that I see for people that have this miss or this issue. And then also we're going to look at a change, and for some of you it might feel like a pretty drastic change, but it's very often a very successful change on how to take the things we shouldn't be doing in our short game and flip it on their head and get the right things working for us. So let's go ahead and dive into this video, how to stop being a hangback flipper. All right, so how do we stop doing this? One of the most common things that I see when we struggle with making poor contact, usually it's because we struggle with bottoming out too far behind the golf ball. And a lot of that has to do with our center of mass. And what I mean by that is for a lot of players that tend to hit behind these short game shots, they themselves are behind it. Even if they've got pretty good setup, if they've got pretty good setup with narrow stance, different things like that, or even those of you who chip with wide stances, if you struggle bottoming out behind, usually it's because your center of mass is back there, and that's because we are not using our body and understanding how to pivot properly. Oftentimes when we get these little shots, a lot of people feel like they don't want the body to do much and they want it to be all arms and hands. And the sequence is definitely different than is a full swing, but it's definitely not just arms and hands, because let's remember, our arms and hands, they weigh something, right? And what happens for so many people that give me the classic, I want to keep my lower body quiet and I just want to stay there. Well, even if their pressure is good at setup, what tends to happen is that as soon as they start to move the club back, because this weighs something that moves their center of mass behind, and they don't always recognize it because they think, oh, it's a short game shot, I'm not going to move my weight. And then they move and their center of mass moves behind it, and then as they go to make their downswing, they bottom out behind it. So we're going to change the way we think about the short game, and it's going to be important to understand that our upper body and the way that we rotate and start the downswing, that pivot, has a lot to do with the upper body and not so much with the arms and hands at the start. Because something that I see for a lot of people is once they get back here, then they start that downswing or they don't get their chest moving, and then they start that downswing with the arms and hands, and then they hit behind. So the drastic change that we're going to make is we are going to chip cross-handed, or at least make practice swings chipping cross-handed. And the reason why, the thing that I identify most often is for people that struggle with poor contact, I look at their trail wrist. I'm a right-handed golfer, so I look at my right wrist. And for those that tend to hang back and end up bottoming out too early, when they flip at it and when the club head gets to the golf ball first, what happens is that trail wrist starts to work too much into flexion or starts to bow too much, and they kind of lose the extension that we have in our trail wrist. So that hang backer, they see this motion. The reason why I like to exaggerate going cross-handed is because as soon as I set up to a shot cross-handed, normally what happens for a lot of players when we do it, because our lead arm is low, that actually gets that right hand set up in a little bit of extension. And for players that tend to flip, or their lead hand, or if we think of the left hand it doing this motion, when we go cross-handed now, the flip is going to be a lot different because we're not going to have this motion to carry the club. It's going to be our pivot and the way that our upper body leads this golf shot. So I take my normal setup, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to flip my grip. And now as I make my backswing, another thing that I notice as well is as I make that backswing, I actually kind of get that trail wrist working into a little bit of extension. And then now, because I have that cross-handed feeling from there, I want my upper body and my pivot to start the downswing. And what's going to happen with that is that's actually going to keep that right hand in some extension as I come through into this finish. Now the thing I'll preface is, yes, obviously if we're trying to hit a flop shot or different things like that, the release is going to look different. But when I see players, good short game players with their traditional grip, right, when they get through to that finish position, oftentimes we see that right hand has a little bit of extension in it. But the way that that has happened is that our upper body and our pivot, that's what's gotten us moving towards the target. So for me, moving towards the left and rotating my chest so that that can lead the arms and hands to come through. So I've got a little bit of that right wrist hinge there. So what we're going to do this process, we're going to sit up and we're going to make some rehearsal swings, cross-handed. And the goal is when we finish, when we come to that finish position, the thing that we're looking for is, did we get some pressure? Do we have some pressure on our lead side? Did we lead that downswing with the pivot of our upper body? And then lastly, do we see some extension in that right hand? And then the way that we would work this with actually hitting golf shots is we would come in, we would go cross-handed, we'd make some of these rehearsals, and then we'd switch back to our normal grip. And the keys that we're looking to take away from that is we're going to lead with our chest, with our pivot. That's going to maintain some width. And when we lead that downswing with our pivot, we're going to come through to that finish position, and we're going to look to see, do I have pressure on my lead leg, and did I maintain some extension in that right wrist? Another way that we can do it as well, before we even introduce a golf club, is we think of right now, if I was to make a backstroke with just my right hand, if I don't use my chest to initiate that pivot, the only way that I would ever get anything to the golf ball is I would end up being back here releasing it. I can't maintain that long enough to get all the way to the golf ball. So yes, a lot of you might think that that cross-handed feel is quite extreme, but the main thing we're looking for, if you're that person that hangs back and has that flippy motion where you bottom out, we're looking to keep our upper body and our pivot as the leader of the motion so that we can maintain a little bit of width and a little bit of extension in that right hand. For a lot of players, I often hear things that we want minimal wrist action, which I believe, but I don't think that we want no wrist action. The only way that we're going to have minimal wrist action is something else has to move the golf club. So if you want to quote unquote keep your hands out of it or limit the amount of action that we have, our pivot has to lead the way. And now back to this traditional grip here, when we think of that concept, if I make my backswing, I know that I'm going to want to move my pressure a little bit to the left, and then from there I'm going to want to get this club down to the golf ball. If I don't want to use my hands a lot, that's going to come from my chest and its ability to pivot and get us down to the golf ball. So this position here, for so many of you, that right wrist is going to be an important one. I'm going to give you this angle as well, because for the people that tend to hang back and flip, right, we often see this motion right here, where we see the left hand, the hands have really kind of worked their way up, that lead hand's an extension. But when I make this cross-handed action, the first one where my chest is leading my pivot, this is my finish position right here, and that's what my trail wrist looks like. It has some extension. So now when I go back to my normal grip, hitting my normal shots, I'm looking to have that finish position again where I have that right wrist and extension. My chest has led my pivot to get me in front of the golf ball, minimize the wrist movement while still having the right wrist conditions that we're looking for. So if I can summarize what we're trying to do, we're trying to hit better short game shots, right? We're really trying to control where we bottom out. And if we want to bottom out in the right spot more often, it can't just be arms and hands. We need to have our chest and our pivot leading the way. And the way that we minimize how much hands we use is have a little bit of understanding that right wrist, being able to maintain some extension in that right wrist as we come through that shot is a great thing for you to check, a great feedback tool. And if you just struggle with this motion so much, if we go ahead and we try to chip cross-handed and finish with our pressure forward on that lead leg and know that our upper body, our chest, our pivot is what is carrying that club down to the golf ball. That'll give us a chance to sequence it the right way. So I hope you enjoyed watching. Let's get yourselves organized. Let's make sure we're going to lead with our pivot. We're going to keep an eye on our right wrist. And if you've enjoyed this video, I hope you'll consider subscribing for when I drop more videos. You'll be the first to know. Thanks again, folks, for watching, and have a great day.